So big welcome to Tim.
Thank you too. So it's applause is very nice when you work in one-to-one performance and people just leave. Yes, I can continue and explain a little bit. So I'm a sound artist, a performance artist, installation artist, I guess, and also a sound designer for spatial audio works. So I'm working with VR projects, doing sound design for VR projects and sound recording and mixing for that. I'm doing some theatre projects where they're interested in immersive sound, particularly. Some theatre projects where kind of more regular sound design, except I'm trying to sneak in like different approaches, and some film projects as well. So I guess similar to, it's like being an artist is a bit like an octopus. You try different things. So I'm sort of split between a few different things, but generally this talk about one-to-one practice is sort of the thing that hangs them all together, and how I work with sound is also a big kind of thread amongst all the different activities. So, but this is great because normally I'm talking about a specific project, or I'm talking about spatial audio, and this is actually the first time I think I've spoken about generally what I do. So it was actually quite hard because I've realised I've done a lot of different things, but I think it's quite interesting to look at this idea of one-to-one and how that informs how I work with sound, with collaborations, with audiences, not just in performance but in various different ways. So is this okay, or do you need the lights off to see?
So
it's
far
good.
it's good.
Yeah? Okay. So, and as I was mentioning before, I mean, presentations is not such a strong point of mine because I'm quite used to improvising things or like not working with so much visual material actually. So I get a bit excited about doing this. And then I'm also a bit like, what's the next thing? Yeah, this one. So I'm trying to keep it a bit like where it's needed. So this, Hello Cleveland. You know this, the Spinal Tap reference? Does anyone know this reference?
Not really.
No. Okay. This is the second time I've done a Spinal Tap reference, and it's just the last time actually the lecturers and I laughed and the students didn't know. But so there's a film called Spinal Tap, or This Is Spinal Tap, from the 80s. It was kind of one of the first, you could say, mockumentaries. So it's about a rock band, a fictitious rock band, but they'd taken elements of things that had happened in that kind of era of extravagant 70s prog rock bands, like hard rock bands, all of those like stupid stories you'd hear about the excess of it and what their demands were and how they were behaving and what they expected and things like that. And so there's a whole like film made as if it's a documentary about this band of that era, and it's very funny. If you haven't seen it, it's quite funny. And of course musicians identify with it a lot because they're like, oh yeah, we had this moment. But in I don't have a screenshot, but there's this one point where they go on stage. I think it's maybe the same time they get lost backstage and they can't find the stage, and they emerge out and it's like, hello Cleveland, and it's like, we're not Cleveland, you know, because they're so used to like greeting this audience. But this is so that's the joke. Yeah,
those guys were like Saturday Night Live guys, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of them. Yeah, and a lot of them were from the States, but they're playing this British rock band, so they have really funny names like Nigel Tufnell, like this really like British name, and they're doing this kind of funny accent. It's a funny film. It's where Taking It Up to 11 comes from. But this bit I think is a nice lead into what I'm going to talk about. So this like Hello Cleveland, bands being on the road.
Oh, that's the lighter thing.
Yeah.
The rock band.
Yeah. I thought you were talking about lights.
No, does anybody have a light?
But you said it was an imaginary
this
rock
is
band.
yeah. This is linked to what I'm about to say actually. So this like communication.
This is an imaginary lighter.
Yeah. Getting into it. So the idea of this is you have these bands going on stage and they don't know what. Of course they don't know. It's like everyone looks the same. They don't. You know, they're getting the wrong city, and it's very funny because you know they're not in that city. It actually happened to what was it? Guns N' Roses, actually. For real, after the film. They actually had this moment. And they were like, "Hello, Sydney," and it was Melbourne. It's a lot of the stuff has actually come true before or after the film. So there's this idea, you're performing stuff, you're going in front of an audience, and what is the audience? Like, what do you see? Do you see a mass? Do you see, someone you recognise, someone looks familiar? Are you just seeing faces, and it's just, it could be any city, or is it specifically this group? So that's one way, and I think that's more of as funny as it is, it's more of like a way that you might work with, particularly with theatre, with big group audiences. You have this, in traditional theatre, you have the proscenium arch, you have the stage, you have the audience there. You have raked seating, you can't necessarily see the seating. Also, if you're a musician, you don't necessarily. First time when I was playing guitar years ago, and I did like a gig thing, just like a gig night, open mic night, and I was just like, "Whoa, these lights are bright! I can't see anything." It's like I can't see anything out there. So that's one approach. This is another approach. There was when I was younger, I was watching the Foo Fighters play Glastonbury on TV actually, and I remember Dave Grohl seeing someone. I think it was with the yellow shirt. Or red shirt maybe, but he saw someone and he was like, he could see them because they were so tall, and he pointed them out and said, this is the song is for you. So he was identifying with someone in the crowd. I mean, lots of bands also do this. Of course, he's seeing someone directly, and he's acknowledging that they're there. So this is kind of what I'm starting to explore in my work, where how you go from something that you present and you're just having people come, and it's like different people, to starting to see these people with the yellow shirt, the red shirt, Mike, Camilla. So I think, so that's a little bit of where this is kind of come from, these works that I'm making. That's sort of where they're coming from. Looking at different ways of interacting with an audience, rather than seeing a sea of faces, but actually trying to find resonances with it. So we're going to do a little thing. So if you want to turn your chairs and face away from the table, and if you close your eyes, let's take it. We'll take a while to listen to the room. Then I'm going to walk around. When I'm in front of you, you can open your eyes. But when I'm in front of you, you know my name, but it's me. Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming. It's going to be fun. I hope so. I think so. Hey, thanks for fixing this. You're welcome. Okay, so you're welcome to turn back around, or not, if you don't. So what I'm working with really is, I think it's on the next slide, is moving away from this type of approach to art, where this is like, of course, the quite funny extreme example, Where this, you can say you have specific individual responses to the Mona Lisa, but it's so, of course, it's so like mediated. I mean, you can see with the phones that even if you wanted to have your own response to the Mona Lisa and you were trying to forget everything you knew about it in this moment, you have so many people around you. There's actually, I didn't actually do another photo where you see the cordon of like the queue of people, but that whole framing, it's really working against this kind of relationship you could have with an artwork. This is another example. I don't know if you know Marina Abramovich, yeah? So this is also quite interesting. And this is my take on one-to-one, but for me, it's not so much about this either, because here, it's an interesting work in itself, but you kind of wonder how much of the, I mean, I can just see the crowd in the background. That's what I see. How much intimacy could you create with this? How much connection with the artist with this framing? And I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the point to do that, but again, for me, it's these things, this frameworks, these societal patterns, all matter to when you want to create something that's a different type of connection.
Was it important in the last picture,
Yeah.
if you go back,
Yeah.
to know what those people are looking at? You see how
Mhm.
they're all looking that way?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the presence. I think for me, it's about the presence of people around you and the context of like queuing, waiting up for something. Yeah, that's the frame. So whether you feel looked at the time or whether you don't, it's about the presence of that. It's and the framing.
Yeah.
That's for me. I mean, you could say this is one-to-one, of course, but for me, with my practice, I'm trying to get away from that and trying to do this approach where I'm trying to look at these intimate moments with somebody, and that doesn't have to be between me and a person. It could be between an artwork, it could be between a sound design, it could be between an audio-visual work, but something that's a connection, individual connection. The challenge is what you think might happen. Things getting away from this frame, often denying language. It's something that you can't necessarily explain, which is quite difficult now in this presentation, and it goes against these kind of formats. So the one-to-one practice that I'm doing, this doesn't necessarily go for everything, but it's really focusing on how to build these connections as a difference from something where you're part of a group, or you're framed by a group, or framed by a structure that expects you to do certain things. So for me, I'm making works that kind of go more into this intimacy with the possibilities of what can happen. And just to give some examples, I made a work in Konsthall in Lund, and during that, at the end of the performance, the audience member got like a flashlight that I've been using. That was the only light source in the room. It was completely dark otherwise, and they got it at the end, and they were able to look around the room and see what was there. And I hadn't realised actually, but I think I'd seen it on the side at some point, but hadn't really noticed. There was a cowboy hat left on the shelf. It was there were like some workrooms, and I didn't really think about it so much until one of the participants saw this cowboy hat and saw me standing there waiting while they looked around, and started dressing me as a cowboy. And I stood there. And another time, someone started to really not behave how you would expect. If you're, for example, saying something in a performance context, and she starts trying to ask me questions and have a conversation and tell me about how much she likes the dark. And it's like, how do you handle that? It's like a kind of really interesting thing that happens when someone doesn't behave as you expect, and you can of course say this is not what I want. Like you should be listening to me, or you should be doing this. But it's like what is the should be thing is with me. It's like I should be open to this person and how they want to respond. And if I feel that it's counterproductive or, well, it could be extreme and dangerous, I know Marina Ravich has been in situations like that, then it's kind of what do I want to allow, and what freedom am I giving, how are they responding in this moment. But really it's about these kind of a different way of working with audiences. And in a way it's like almost the audience word becomes a problem, so you might want to say participant as well, but that also doesn't quite fit, so sometimes it's just thinking of another. It's basically how I like to frame these interactions. Yeah. So, talking of which, this structure is also difficult to talk about one-to-one. Because we're expecting you to sit here listening and watching the screen and watching me. But this is one framework, but I'm going to just talk now. I think in a different way. So it's not the end, there's some pictures later. At the end of my intro to one-to-one. So I'm going to come, actually no, with the camera's here, maybe I should say it. But yeah. So it's just to think about these kind of structures and assumptions that we have. Like you have a concert, you have a performance, you expect people to sort of come a certain way. So what I'm exploring is more how you can have people coming into something, and what do they know beforehand, what don't they know, what type of audience are they, and how do you kind of work with that rather than trying to target your audience. For me it helps because my partner works in science, in biomedical sciences, so and a lot of her friends also hang out with us, so it's always a kind of nice reminder that actually there's very different ways of seeing things. So if I'm explaining some of my work to her and her friends, then it seems, it can seem quite weird. If I explain something to people here, it seems quite normal. So that's always interesting to be aware of that. It's like how would other people from different backgrounds find this kind of work? So I thought it could be interesting to talk a bit about how I ended up with this, because it's kind of I've been asked a few times about why I'm working with one-to-one and like how do you do it, and where does it, what interests you about it. So just to give a brief thing, and also I'll show some examples so it's not so abstract. But I think with my practice, I wasn't, I wouldn't say I was an artist until I graduated from my drama degree in 2011. I wouldn't say I was into drama before I started my drama degree in 2007. I wouldn't really say I was anyone I thought of as being creative before the age of 16. So and I think that's kind of interesting now, thinking about why I'm working with this. So I was kind of kid with I wouldn't say a very like on paper artistic family, and a family that kind of expected you to get a proper job, and I think most of the people I knew were not really doing anything. Just I knew a few people later on that were maybe amateur theatre and stuff, and singing and stuff, but when I was younger I didn't really know anyone doing that, so I didn't really think it was I didn't think you could do that. So when I kind of started my education, I did like more subjects that were kind of more straight subjects, I guess, and then I just found out I couldn't do it. Like I could maybe technically do some of it, but it wasn't really clicking. So I kind of started to learn the guitar because I saw a lot of bands. It was quite in the end of the 90s in the UK, so a lot of like guitar bands all over the place. So I was like, this is amazing. This is like, wow, that's such a different way of living, And so I thought this is kind of creativity, and it's like, what is this? So I kind of went really into that and started to learn the guitar and wanted to be a musician, and for quite a while. And then I hadn't really stopped and thought, like, what do I want to do? It's more like, this is cool. This is the only thing I'm seeing, and I thought that's what I want. And that kind of went until I started doing a degree. And my drama degree came out because this is not stuff you should be admitting in a talk, but I think it's interesting. So I did a drama degree because you have to kind of go and get a degree really to get any kind of job, and I basically ended up in a situation where I was doing like office work, trying to make money to buy the next guitar or something, and it was starting to get quite depressing, and it's like I could stay in this office job if I don't make it as a musician. This is going to be my life. And then my girlfriend was saying, okay, let's look at some degrees, and I just chose some universities based on cities that I thought were pretty cool in the UK. And then I got a pile of prospectuses, and then she was a bit surprised when I said I wanted to do drama because I hadn't done it before. And I basically went through the prospectus, and I tried to empty any preconceptions of what I should do, and I basically went for every subject and took out the name of the subject. So I just read the description without that word in it. So I remember coming to the drama one, and so I ignored the word drama. I just read it, and it was about exploring creativity, sort of researching different methods, kind of course expressing yourself and trying different things. I was like, wow, this is really exciting. This is kind of really, something. And then I was like, but it's drama. I've never really been to the theatre, and I mean I've watched films a bit, but I wouldn't say I'm a drama candidate at all. But over the next few days I thought more about it, and then it's like, this actually really, this is kind of really exciting. So I kept going with it, and then I applied, and then I somehow got an interview day at a few other universities, and then I got in. I was a bit older, like 25 when I started, so I was a bit older than mature students. Are a rarer thing in the UK, sadly. So I was a mature student at the age of 25, and we had like a drama workshop on the interview day, and it was the first one I'd ever done. So in my interview, they're like, "How did you find it?" I was like, "Well, considering it was the first one, it was really, really nice." And so what, and there was this moment in the workshop where we're told to walk around the space. I'd never heard that before. It was like, this is a strange thing to say, but okay. And then the person giving the workshop was like, now imagine you're being watched, and everyone around me, not kidding, they kind of went into like jazz hands. They just kind of went like this, like walking around, and I was like, I didn't know, what's that? And I was like, okay, then I imagine someone's watching me. So that was kind of how I started my drama degree. And then it was the other students that were starting to teach me little bits about how to perform on stage and things like that. But the thing was about that course was that it was quite really breaking down how a lot of the other the way of thinking about drama had been taught earlier on before university. So actually we were all in the same boat. But my my kind of realization with that was just to kind of go into it, just to be open, try different things, and just see what happens. And it was like, I was doing such a shitty job before that. It was the audition day was like, I just get a day off this work, and then see. So taking it by a bit at a time, kind of going kind of all in, and like, this is, I'm so lucky to be trying something creative, and just sort of being open to everything. And that's kind of what started me into, actually I'm really enjoying this, and I'm getting something from this that I wasn't really finding with music in the sense that I knew of it. So I started to work more with making performances, and I really enjoyed that more than looking at film analysis, for example. And I was still very interested in sound, and I was also interested in technology of sound, so I was doing some more sound design. So then when I graduated, I was really hooked, and I was like, I'm going to be a performance artist after it, which was, again, like, it's not really the thing you really want to be announcing when you finish, because it's not the most secure thing afterwards. So then I was working with that, and one-to-one was something that I came across during the last bits of my degree. So there was a sort of trend in the UK at the time for one-to-one works to be coming out, and it was quite a new concept to some of us. We thought theatre, you have a group of people sitting there, maybe participatory performance, you have a group of people going around to get together around a building or something, experiencing different things, but the one-to-one thing was quite different and quite exciting, because it felt more like really guerrilla type performance. So they had a festival in London at the Battersea Art Centre, which was lots of different artists, lots of them I didn't know, some of the names I recognised, and it was in an old town hall, and you would basically book a certain, it was like called a menu. You chose like the daring menu or the whatever menu, and you'd have certain performances you'd go and see in that evening. And it was the first time I'd ever been to London and actually liked it, because normally in London it's so many people, so much noise. It's really very different pace, and if you're not used to that or you don't really enjoy that, it's you feel very anonymous and very like, I need to get space from this. And on this occasion I travelled down by myself to go and check this out. None of my friends were to come at the time, and then I went to this place that I hadn't been to before, and I tried these performances, and I had this connection with all of these different artists and with other audience members between the performances, and it was amazing. It was like the first time I'd really felt like I'm happy to be here, and it's like there's something really nice. It's like rewarding for coming down to this. And then I got to see some really interesting works, and they were in different rooms, different parts of the building, really exploring. And amongst this, there were starting to be some things in Bristol where I was studying as well. And one of the most memorable experiences was, on paper, something that's really boring. So on paper it would read, you have a 10-minute time slot. Someone comes in through a door, there's some curtains just sort of like opened in front of them into an empty room, and they're told to wait for the performance to start. After 10 minutes, they're let out. Okay, that's on paper, right? Super like, okay. But what happened in that 10 minutes was that I went in there, was waiting for this thing to start, and I was suddenly aware of so many different things about the room, the smell of the room, the sound of the room, people walking past in the corridor behind me, how the room looked. I was really exploring like all those little bits that I would normally not have paid attention to. I was aware of myself, like I'm feeling kind of a bit like, oh, what's going to happen, and then it's like, nothing's going to happen. Oh, okay then, and I'm not worried about this. What are they doing? And then it's sort of like, but maybe something will. Maybe they're watching me. Maybe they're not watching me. Maybe I'm just watching myself. Like, should I just leave, or is someone going to open the door? And this is kind of interesting. Who made this? Like, why have they done this before? So like, there's a whole process. So in 10 minutes, so much happened with me in different like modes and different tones that actually, after that 10 minutes, it was, in my opinion, by far the most interesting work than the actual ones we went in with the performer on that evening. So from this, I was like, there's something really special about this format, and this way you can start working with people. And one of the things I was also realizing was that when you're working with one specific audience member, you're not only just it means that you don't know who's going to come in, so you have to resist these assumptions, but you're also suddenly aware of these other things. So you're aware of like, what are they thinking about this room? Like, what's the temperature like? If there's a sound, I mean, it's like in theatre, you have certain things like you're kind of used to sound coming from speakers, right? But if you're having one audience member and they don't know what to expect, even if it's in a theatre, it's going to seem pretty weird if the theatre speakers just suddenly start playing. So why would they start being used? Or is there another way to start? Is it headphones is better? But then how do they get the headphones? Why have they got headphones? A lot of these things that you would take for granted in a group format suddenly become questions. So, which also means that they're possibilities. So now I was starting to look at immersive technology. I just recently heard some binaural sound, and not a one-to-one work, but a different art piece. So I realized that you could do so much with sound and presence, and having sound coming from all directions. And I was like, this is actually really super interesting, because we have this connection that you're trying to create with someone, and this like heightened sensitivity to the context, and then you have these technologies that can facilitate that or change that perception in very quickly or very slowly, and without them realizing, you can start to kind of, it's almost like playing these different elements, bringing in the room, bringing in, okay, Mike, how are you now? You need a toilet break, or like, how did you get here? Do we need to take it slower, or like you want to faster? So all of these things suddenly became part of the work. So I was talking to an artist the other day and about thinking about audience, because I think it's quite a common thing that you tend to make artwork that you want to experience yourself, right? But the artist I was talking to was saying that they don't really think about the audience. It's just like they do something and then that's the last thing they think about. And I was like, but that's the first thing I think about. Well, maybe I have an idea, then it's the first thing I think about. Because for me, it's like if I'm making something, and I'm not thinking about them, then it's like, why am I? There's no, then I'm just going to do it for myself, and it's just it's just a diversion for something. But if I'm going to do something that I want people to experience, then I should be thinking about them at the start, because this thing I want to curate or share with them or work with them together, then they need to be part of that equation. I can't just so how do you do that when you're not assuming stuff about them? So that's the kind of challenge. How do you try to imagine all of the different possibilities that could happen, because there's always things that happen, like the cowboy hat that you didn't think would happen, like someone walking out because I don't think this guy actually heard with his hearing aids, so he just left halfway through a performance once. How do you not have that completely kill something, but embrace that? And that's the challenge that's mainly at the core of every project I do. How do you allow these things to be open, yet you still maybe want a framework to allow it to happen, and to kind of have something where you're not putting the pressure onto the other person to carry it. How do you carry it and they feel supported? They might not be used to performance, they might not be used to, let's say, spatial audio, they might not be used to coming to a place like this. Sometimes people literally come in by accident. They kind of get grabbed by someone. Oh, have you checked this out? So I have had that happen. So people they know nothing about it. They're just kind of coming in cold to experience. So that means I have to work quite hard with, it's called in VR onboarding and offboarding. This idea that you take somebody from the first time in the cases I work with, it's more like the first time they hear about something, first time they know about something that might interest them. How do you take it from that point to when they're physically leaving, or the work is technically finishing? And even how do you take it beyond that? Like, what's left later? How do they remember this experience? How does that change over time? And is there something you really want to stand out with that? So there's a lot of questions, but I think there's a lot of possibilities in that approach. So that's kind of why I'm still working with one-to-one, because there's a lot of different ways you can start to work with these ideas, and a lot of different contexts you can apply it. So I'm not just applying it to performances, I'm also thinking about this with sound works, with teaching or talks, and also with when I'm working on sound design for like a VR project. I'm also very heavily interested in that. Like, how do you have people coming into this experience? How do you transition between environments in a virtual space, for example? How do you work with their sense of presence or not? And how do you allow them to feel like they're being supported and they're sort of free to explore within this? So that's sort of where I'm kind of heading with my thoughts on the projects that we're going to look at. And one other thing to say is they're not always working with technology in a very obvious way. So the first thing I made after my degree was in a dark room with it's the one with the cowboy hat. It's the flashlight. I had just a flashlight, it's a torch. I was working with distance and proximity. And going back to that work, I realised how much it was about listening. So even though I didn't think of it as being about sound so much, now with hindsight I'm like, yeah, I can see why I'm working so much with sound, actually, even before I realised I was doing it. So, if you have any questions, by the way, or
I did have a thought about the name for, instead of audience, interactor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because participant is also something else, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but I think it's also it's a question of how do they interact and what does that mean. So I think that's something that's interesting too. A lot of it is like, it's not the word, it's like how we think of the word, isn't it? Because I have this thought that like a lot of things that I would describe as interactive, again, on paper they're not interactive. It's like, someone walks into a room, stands there, nothing happens for 10 minutes. But I would say that was highly interactive because I was so engaged in that mentally and also physically. I mean, I felt like I felt the whole like, oh, what am I doing? Like, there's no one here. Like, is there someone going to jump out and like, I'm going to jump in a minute. So I physically felt that response, and then at certain points I felt very calm, and then I felt like, oh, now I'm kind of confident and like, oh, it doesn't matter, because I'm whatever. They're not going to. If they jump out now, it's like, so what? So I went through a whole different like physical emotions too with that. So I'd say that was highly interactive. So I think it's like you say, it's like interactor. It's very interesting because for some people that would mean one thing, but I think probably for us, maybe we'd think of something a bit different. Yeah.
Well, it really depends on the people, right? So interactor could be an interesting phrase, but for some people it's totally inappropriate because they might just not care. They'll leave after 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And in that case, there's no interactivity if they just shut off. So it's interesting, right? Because sometimes sometimes it works. Sometimes people are in different spaces.
But I would say if someone leaves, that's a really big interaction.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so too.
Depending on what you're interacting with.
Well, that's true. Yeah. Yeah. But I think it's
because you're not interacting with the artwork as it is, but with their life and the situation.
Yeah, well, but maybe you're responding to that, so it's So it's like an active choice. So I think
that's right.
I do have a habit of trying to encourage people to if they're not enjoying something, just leave. Because it's I think it's one of the really I've started doing it a bit actually. I feel a bit bad, but
really?
Yeah, I'm like it's not my comfort zone is to be kind of polite and respect something, but I think. Was it my grandma actually, when she was just turned 80, she told me, she was like, I don't feel any different really to how I was when I was 17, except I just know my own mind more. And I've been actually, you know what, it's like, I mean, now I have kids and stuff, so it's like if I'm going to an art event, it's usually like it's not so common now because I have to like plan time for it and things. And so now I'm a bit more like that. It's like if I'm really not enjoying it, or if I feel that someone is being self-indulgent and not respecting the fact that we're all giving a lot of time to experience this, then I will have started to walk off actually, and it feels great. I encourage everyone to do it because it's like you shouldn't feel that you have to be in this mode, and I think the best thing you can do is like, no, I mean, thank you for. I'm glad I experienced this, but this is. I'm done. Or if something's really interesting, then of course you can express that in a different way. But I think the whole like, when I'm working with one-to-one, this comes across very strongly. If I've failed in some part, it's very clear. If I've allowed people space to, like for example, one of the projects I'm going to show you, people are given enough. Like they're not told when to leave. They're just told they can stay in the room for as long as they want. And I've noticed that most people do stay in there quite a long time, and they seem to be quite thankful when they come out that they've had this time, and they're kind of told they can leave when they want. And it's also during the work they're told that if they have problems they can contact me, and I have had people kind of, not very often, but I have had people have problems when I do things in darkness for their strong emotions.
So don't you think that's kind of a class thing and also a societal thing, like how well you're educated, that you want to be more respectful of the thing that you're attending?
I mean,
But if you're from a different sort of class, then it'd be like, oh, fuck that.
I don't know if it's maybe as clear as that. I think it's.
Well, I think particularly from the States, it's maybe more prevalent than the UK. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean in the UK, there's been some what I'd say quite privileged people who have been more like that actually, more. So I think it's. I mean it's. Definitely an attitude and definitely a kind of contextual issue. What you're used to, how do you see people behaving, what do you think is okay? But I think it's if someone walks out, it's I kind of like that anyway. I mean personally I feel quite bad if it's something because I've done it. So because I now have this way of working where I try to respect the audience. So I respect that they're giving me time and they're trying something, because again it's like if you're working with one-to-one performances and it's not in a I mean even if it's in a very like comfortable environment, you're still basically asking someone to by themselves go into something without necessarily knowing what's going to happen, and even if they know a lot about it, even if they know me, I've had friends do stuff and they're still a bit worried because they don't know what I'm going to do in the performance, even if they know me really well. So it basically, every time I've seen that people are giving a lot of trust. And when I was in my drama degree, of course, we used to mess around with audiences a lot. But now it's like, I see the value in acknowledging that and respecting that. It doesn't mean you have to be nice to the audience. It doesn't mean you have to be really kind of like in a way very slow and respectful. But you have to be kind of clear that what you're doing is kind of for both you and bits for them. It's this context you can build together rather than I'm going to do this regardless, and then they're just going to have to.
Yeah, I mean the history that I'm aware of, it goes back to at least Kenneth Gaburo and Pauline Oliveros in the States from UCSD, and because there's that whole experimental thing that people were doing that transcended the boundaries of music and sound even, and so they were working with psychologists and working with people in all sorts of different fields doing these types of activities in which you're working with people in real life in different ways, but in real life ways, so that people have the freedom to do what they want. And this was in the 60s that they began that stuff.
It's not a.
So probably the history of this is older, right? Do you know anything about?
Yeah, so I think I was thinking about this for the presentation as well, and it's like, I mean, where do you? Again, it comes down to like, if you let's say you're going to talk about the history of like one-to-one performance, right? Then it's like, okay, well, what is one-to-one? You're trying to find out what is performance. Where do you is it that the happenings in the 60s and 70s? You could say a lot of those, like, of course, they have this approach to them. They have a method. But I mean, before that, like someone giving a piano concert to their neighbor or something and they're having some sort of connection through that. I mean, it's really a question of, it's like, what is art? It's like, where do you start and stop it? But I think this kind of thinking is not really so kind of prominent, I think, as it could be in terms of audience engagement.
Like the Inuit from Alaska, they have the gambling games where they're two people sitting face to face, and they're doing this thing, and they're free to leave when they want, and their audiences or not.
Yeah.
And now they have competitions, but that's a very old thing. It's different, but it's kind of similar. Right?
Yeah. So I think a lot of what I'm interested in is not necessarily, particularly using sound. It's not necessarily to do something new and very different. It's more like, how can you use technology and artistic methods to get kind of connected in a deeper way. Doesn't mean that you can't connect in a deeper way in other ways. Doesn't mean that it's totally new. But I think particularly now with the classic example is like people putting headphones on to walk down the street, and they're having the soundtrack. They're having like a soundtrack to their lives, literally, because they're listening to these different tracks, Spotify playlists, or whatever. And when I've been working with binaural audio walks, a big part is having the sounds of where they are coming in.
Wouldn't that be interesting if suddenly, walking down New York City, there's 3,000 people in the same block on both sides, right? And all of a sudden, all those headphones tune into the same sounds.
Yeah.
And they all were like how would they react differently? Like, before they're all tuned into their own thing, and then suddenly, would they like begin to walk at the same rhythm, or would it be on the beat or with the beat, or again? I mean, okay, that's.
Yeah.
I wonder if is that possible? Yeah. Can we do that?
Yeah.
Can we do that to people? Can we get into their telephones?
Well, I'm sure Google can.
I'm not being serious.
Yeah, no, that's good. Who's first?
Was it all us three at the same time? No. Okay. All right, sorry. Just maybe I'm getting ahead of your presentation, but do you have like any like golden criteria for this one-to-one idea?
Yeah.
I mean, I understand it is sorry my ignorance here, but I understand it is like creating some kind of relationship between the performer and the audience or the interactor or whatever you want to call but I mean, how far? I mean, there must be limits because you can't have relationships with a crowd of 100,000 people. Easier with 10, or you can. I don't know. But what's your kind of take on that?
Yeah. So I think it's like. I mean, it's a. I mean, this is really about how I'm thinking about this. It's like, it doesn't mean that other people would work with one-to-one like this. This is more how I'm kind of explaining what I'm doing in my projects. But I think for me, it's not so much about having one person at a time. It could be more. I think with the idea of people spectating or waiting, that's a bit strange for my thinking. But in term or counterproductive, I could say, maybe to something that could be created. Doesn't mean that I might not make something like that where people are queuing and thing. But I think for me, it doesn't have to be like one person and an artist in a separate room. It could be 100,000, but it's more like, how do you work with those 100,000, or the idea of people? Do you do like a slightly different soundtrack for everyone, or does everyone get the same one, but you're recognizing that they might do something slightly different, or this song might mean something to this person in that crowd and not for everyone else? Yeah. How do you just have these questions? It's more about questions. It's more like a process. Like, how do you think about your go back to the word audience. How do you think about your audience in that way, and how do you think about these aspects of do they need a toilet break? Is the room too cold? Have they found this place easily? Like, what have they experienced beforehand? What is happening around us right now in the festival environment, for example? How are they going to feel afterwards? It's kind of like a tuning in to those things rather than an assumption that they will come and they will have an experience and this is the artwork and then they leave. You know, it's more like sort of finely tuning that connection as a really important part of the process of making the artwork.
When you said that, Miguel, I was thinking that like at a soccer match, like at the World Cup, you know, you have 100,000 people in the stadium, and then a guy scores, and then he goes and slaps hands with 10 guys who are in the stands, right? I don't know if they do that in American football, right? They like slap hands with the audience, you know, right? And maybe they do that in the World Cup as well. But in that way, it's like, hey, you with the yellow shirt.
Yeah.
Right? So, hey, ooh, he slapped my hand. I'll never wash my hand for the next week.
Yeah. Yeah. And then some people might turn around and go, oh, that really hurt. Actually, that's I didn't want my hand, so I was just like putting my hand up, you know, and yeah. So that's what I find quite exciting. Is how do people respond to these things, and you know, what can you trigger?
And the guy's holding a beer, right? Slap. Oh.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Do you have?
You want me? Yeah. Okay. Well, it's a little bit of an extension of that, because I've been thinking about two elements of this. Because in one way, are you not really trying to establish a deeper connection in them? And maybe not between you and them, but within them.
Yeah.
And that goes back to the second thought, which has to do with the numbers, one or many, that you are the one, in a way, becoming that octopus, that computer, that psychotherapist, that kind of a super person who is able to flexibly respond to whatever comes at you.
Yeah. There's really good thoughts, because this is something that I've also worked with, and particularly, I mean, I've been talking a little bit more about performance, but some of these examples you'll see, Blackout, which I think, did you try Blackout? No, you didn't. Did you? No.
I think I did actually.
Did
the one
in
the back
yeah,
one,
you did try
last
it.
year.
Yeah.
Oh.
So with some things like that, it's not really. It's quite an introspective experience for the audience. Of course, I'm still present because I made the sound recordings, chose the framework, had the structure of it, all of that. So to say that I wouldn't be present in a way is false, even if I wasn't in the room. Also with sound design, I think this is an approach I take to that too. But you're absolutely right. It's kind of, I have this idea that, and this isn't just my idea, but it's like the more specific you make something, the more universal it can become. It's something that I've been thinking about recently. So what I'm making is a lot of things that are like personally interesting to me, or something that I find could be like really like slowed down or like teased apart a little bit, and whole ideas could come from something quite simple. And then I have the idea that if I find that interesting, maybe other people could find that interesting, and if I acknowledge that they might find that interesting, then I can work with that together with them. So in that case, yeah, it absolutely, because a lot of the things I'm doing, again going back to the interactive thing, it's not so much about physical interaction, it's about what happens with them. What kind of memories could it pull out, or what kind of experiences could it have recall for them? How would it affect them physically? So if we look at some examples now, then I can sort of talk about how people have responded quite differently. That's a bit more concrete to see how this is. But yeah, it's like the connection between the artwork and the person experiencing that, and the connection between me and the person. It's like, I mean. They don't send me Christmas cards afterwards. They might be talking about the performance afterwards, you know. So it's really about what's that triggered in them, what's that kind of given them, and how have they responded to that specifically themselves, compared to someone else.
Because the one you were explaining, the first that made you think about going down this road, there was nothing. You were just you in a room, starting to wonder, and that's interesting.
But I was sort of framing that in a way, because I was speaking to them from the end of this corridor space in that work. But yeah, it's allowing spaces for that too in the work. So all of the works tend to have a space for people to have their own thoughts, or their own like movements, or their own like voice in it as well, and that's important to have that. You know, it's like it's a bit like, you know, the gaps between the musical notes are just as important as the musical notes. So it's like the things that I'm specifically giving are as important as the bits that I'm not specifically giving, or I'm just letting space for in a performance or sound design. So if we look at
yes, I think. No,
sorry. Oh yes, sorry.
So my question is about how do you collect the feedback or the response from the audience? Because I know you have two parts. Parts together with the actor, the performer, because you were involved as well.
Yeah.
I was thinking about the Blackout performance.
Yeah.
You were inside, so you were acting.
Yeah.
At the same time of the actor inside, so you have to collect its response at the same time. Act. And then what happens after? So if the person doesn't come to you and doesn't speak with you about the performance, how do you collect its feedback?
Yeah, that's also something that I've tried to think about a lot, because a lot of the time people just go, actually, and if I've made something in like this one I was talking about with the torch. This is the bit when I got the cowboy hat on. So they're given this torch and they're like allowed to explore the space, and then they're shown out. I stay in the room, and I'm already in there when they come in. They're shown in by someone else. So I hear about it afterwards from like the gallery staff or something, or whoever's been helping me. And it's only if like someone I know is there, or if I come out and it's like the last performance before lunch and I come out and there's someone there and they want to talk. But actually the thing is, often in my projects, people don't want to talk afterwards to me. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. They might want to talk to each other. Sometimes people want to just have some space themselves. I've heard that some people want to take a walk afterwards, perhaps, or they might want to sit in the gallery just by themselves thinking. So again, it's like this kind of, it's hard to have one way to collect feedback on that, and it's not something you can easily put into words either. So when because I do get asked, people experience my works, The only thing I can really say is like there's a certain look that people tend to have. Like it's as if like something, which sounds really stupid, but it's like something has happened that's quite meaningful and deep, but they are still like processing it maybe, or they're like happy. I think. Yeah. Yes, no, I'm gonna. No, this is where I'm not an actor. This is I can do my own stuff.
You're an actor.
Yeah. I don't want to risk ridiculing it, but no, it's so it is hard. So what I have done is like on things where I've been trying out an idea, I have done the whole like question and answer thing, because I really got to a point where I had to find out more concretely what people were thinking about it. It was like quite important. So I did do that, and I kind of made it clear that you didn't have to do it, but people actually wanted to. But some of them would straight away, and some of them wouldn't. And you could tell actually in the answers they were giving that some of them were still like, as you said, I'm still processing this. I'll be able to write better in a week or something. So it's I mean I can get like what those people said, and it's it was very like nice feedback, like really interesting responses, and like very positive. But at the same time, I'm deliberately working with things that can't be put into words so easily. So it's also very hard to expect that to give a full picture of it. Like if someone read all that feedback, you wouldn't really know what people have gone through. So what I sometimes find is it's like I have to sometimes rely on people who've experienced the work to actually explain my work to other people, because I can't really describe it very well. And people who've seen the same work, they have a way of like relating to each other, and it can be quite hard for people as well to describe it, because it's so much is like this internal processing, or like this internal response of work. But if we look at some, just to show some things, so this is the one we're talking about. This is a picture from.
Just gonna hit the lights.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and we're.
The bottom one, yeah.
And we just passed 2, so I won't. So we just passed 2 o'clock, so I won't spend so long with the products, but just to give you an idea about the kind of things, how I'm putting these thoughts into practice. So some of you have experienced Blackout, so maybe you should explain this. But basically, this is it's maybe a one-to-one performance. It's maybe a sound installation. It's a thing, and it's in complete darkness for about 15 20 minutes, and basically there's one audience member at a time. Of course, they come, they meet me, and they're given a pair of headphones with a tracking device on top and a stereo audio receiver. And I explain that this is the equipment and what it does and what I'm putting on them, and I explain that the work is going to be in complete darkness. And that I will be in the room with them, so if there's any problems they can just call out and I can get the lights and everything. I think that's about it actually. Is that all I say? Maybe?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think I say hello as well. And then we go together around, I actually did it in the room just here, the back room. We go together to the entrance.
Do they know where you are?
No.
Okay.
They could do, but they don't ever look behind.
Okay.
It's interesting. So the audio starts. We're standing next to each other. I start the audio from my phone, and I'm listening to the same audio. And then I told them that there's a chair in the center of the room. Actually, that's the thing. So then the audio starts. It's a voiceover. Then they basically, when that is done, they're going to be I show them in, and I just wait. Then they go in, and they take a seat on the chair. And this is what I mean. So I actually come in behind them, and I'm not right behind them. I'm standing by the door. But they don't. It's like from that moment, it's framed, and I've not had anyone yet look behind them to see where I am. So then I shut the door. They sit on the chair, and the lights. There's a bit of light on the chair. It goes down, and then it's basically all driven through sound. So they're hearing voiceover, different field recordings. This is spatial field recordings. So some things that could be from outside the building. Some things that are like the sea, different kind of contexts, different environments, and it's really about them focusing inwards and having space to explore in a way. It's really hard to describe, so I'm not going to attempt to do much more than that, but there's some touch-based interaction that corresponds. So I have a little video. I can just explain a bit as well. That makes a bit more sense. But essentially, the idea of the work in a global sense is sort of looking at object permanence. The idea that babies, when they don't see their parents in front of them, they don't realise that they still exist. It's thinking about sound. How do we, if we hear something but we don't see it, do we think it's happening? If we don't hear something, is it still existing? So it's like playing a little bit with these different sounds from elsewhere and thinking about what's happening around them at the moment and what do they imagine, because they can't see anything. So is this room, where is this room? And a lot of the times they don't know the room as well. So it's like they don't know how big the room is, how small it is. So it's exploring that as well, like the physical space they're in. Like they don't know this, or at least not in this context. So it's really, everything's open. Just imagine you're just listening to different sounds.
And they can move if they want, or they have to stay seated?
Yeah, so they can move if they want. So they start seated, and then they're instructed to stand up, and then they're basically told this is your space. Some people move, some people don't. It's a bit difficult if they do move because they could bump into a wall. But there's this point where they actually are told to follow a sound, which is my voice. So they're following my voice around the room, which is actually recorded in an anechoic chamber with the ambisonic reverb of the specific space. So it sounds like it's in the room. And then I'm exploring this idea of sounds can come from different places to their source. So while they're hearing this idea and they're hearing my voice, I'm moving around differently around them. So,
did you have any difficulties recording in the ambisonic space?
In the impulse responses, or the
yeah, because you recorded your voice in the
in an anechoic chamber.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Did I have difficulties
Any
with that?
difficulties? Could you sing an octave, for instance?
I didn't have any difficulties. It was I enjoyed it a lot. I've been in them a few times, but
inside jokes there. Right?
Yeah, but the self noise of the microphone was a bit difficult to work with because there's nothing else in there. Yeah.
There's a well-known soprano who couldn't sing an octave in the anechoic chamber.
Yeah.
I won't say who it was.
No one in this room, right?
No.
Yeah. But this is how it starts on the chair, and you can see the headphones and the tracking device, which are this here. Just if you're curious. So this is the headphones they have, and then this is a battery, and then a tracking device that measures orientation, which way they're facing the room, and also within 10 centimeters accuracy where they are physically in the room. So the sounds can be mapped to. They can look around in the sounds. Some of them. It's also object-based sounds, so they can move around. Yeah, these lights are life their own, and also it's like the lighting can be mapped to where they are, and.
Why the tracking device? Were you recording the data?
I'm using it in real time to have the like ambisonic content. This is the head tracking for that. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
So the sounds are like fixed in place. It's not in the physical room, but let's say there's always like the bus that goes past in one of the recordings would always be in this place in the room, so that I know that when they hear my voice, it's going to be here. So they're going to move this direction if they follow it, and it's going to be here. Then it's going to be. So it's a kind of calibration way, so that I know everyone will have the sound sources coming from the same place in space when they start.
And was there a Doppler effect then on the bus?
Not with this, because the sounds that were mapped to the room, it was just my voice actually. There was only object based in the end. Yeah, but I could if I wanted to. If one of those sources had been moving very fast, I would put it on. But actually, the voices were static; they were just jumping in position. So yeah, but you could do that. This is running in real time through a MaxMSP patch.
Tim, could you or have you sort of exhibiting this movement of the to other members of audience?
Do you mean?
So while
to show it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's what I was thinking too.
Yeah, I thought about it, but I think it comes back to this idea that people. I think I would rather people were not aware of being filmed, or I didn't do it if they weren't aware.
Well, not filming them, but in terms of if you said a tracking device, that you could see the dot.
Yeah.
So it's like almost like a coordinate system that you follow. And
Yeah, you
plot.
you could do that, absolutely. But I think again for me, it's like I kind of like the ephemerality of it. You know, I like the fact that I know how people will respond, but or like a bit. I mean, I can kind of remember, and you see traces of them when they leave because they lie down at one point. So there's wherever they're going to lie down. I have a thermal imaging camera so I can see where they are. So I put a pillow under their head, and it's always interesting because I forget where I am in the room. I can see them, but I can't necessarily see the room so well. So then when I come back in afterwards and I turn the lights on, I see the pillow on the floor, and I'm like, oh, that's where we ended up. Yeah. So
She didn't like it.
it's good. I encouraged it. Yeah. But she's also experienced this, so yeah. So I think you could map it, but again, I think for me it's like a deliberate act to keep it in this space, in this room, and just to kind of give them that space actually, without thinking of other people. So yeah, but I have this video here. So this is like from my camera.
Okay.
I have this thermal imaging camera, so I can see the other person. There's just a short like clip of it. So this is directly from where I'm looking, what I'm seeing. So which is a bit why it's bad camera work, because I'm trying to look for certain things so I know where to interact with them. And this is a part where they're sort of reaching out to try and feel where my voice is coming from, and they're basically hearing. It's hard to describe so much, but it's like imagine like a sort of like a window of sound. So it's silent everywhere apart from this kind of shape of sound, and within that shape it's a bit spatial. So if they have with the head tracking, that means if they turn this way, it's staying fixed in the space. It's like I guess I think of it like a sci-fi film. You know, it's like a portal opening up, but it's that's what I've done with the sound, and so it's in one direction. They're reaching out towards it. And they're feeling some breeze, some wind coming towards them from this beach. It's like it's a beach sound of the rough sea. So I'm kind of getting moving and getting some air to touch their fingertips. So let's see.
It's almost sensory virtual reality.
Yeah, it's kind of virtual reality without the visuals, I guess. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
But not in COVID times. Yeah,
For the ears.
That was a fan,
Yeah.
really. That was a fan.
So this part is they're instructed to look down at their hands and to see if they know where their hands are without seeing them. Like how do they know where their body is? What do their hands look like? But this is in total darkness. Sophia can't see her hands at all. It's just following the audio instructions.
You know, the crazy thing about this project is that if it's an art project, you don't need to get human subject approval for this. But if it's a research project, you actually have to go through this formal process at the university to do it.
Yeah, my final degree project actually, I did a one-to-one experience in the Black Box Theatre at Bristol University, and it was in I don't have it up here actually in the slides, but it was in you'll find it on my website. But it's I was in swimming trunks, and the audience would get changed in a changing booth in the theatre into their swimming costume, and then it was kind of replicating this idea of going down to the sea and back. So there was a big pool of water in the middle of the Black Box stage area. There was like a projection behind and above, and they were listening on headphones. At some point, I actually used the theatre speakers, and it was like echoing this idea of going to the beach. Probably a British beach where it's quite cold. The water was very cold, and going into the water, getting changed, going to the water, coming back out to changing booth, and while you've been in the water, you've sort of had these like memories of like nostalgia of like, oh, I should really like this water because this is like so cool to be doing this, and then it's also like I'm actually quite cool, but it linking that with memories of water, and they had to have a meeting with the lecturers because it was my final assessed degree project on this practice piece. They had to have a special meeting to see if it was okay for lecturers to be alone in a black box theatre with a student in their swimming costumes, because we were also dancing together to Edith Piaf's Non Je ne regrette rien with a shower actually in the water. So it was quite intimate in a way, but they had to have a meeting about it to get it approved.
I wonder what could go wrong.
Yeah. Well, luckily nothing for me, and I passed my degree. But yeah, it's this is the thing is if you have an idea, you want to try this stuff. Yeah. So but that was Blackout. Just to give you a quick example, this is another project that I'm currently working on. So no one has really experienced this yet because it's not been finished. But I've been going up to BoostHbg in the north of Sweden. I think quite a few of you know about this, but Miguel probably has no idea. So I basically had funding to go to a place called BoostHbg, which is right at the top of Sweden, inside the Arctic Circle, and I've established a collaboration with the research station up there. And at the research station, as part of Umeå University, which is called the Climate Impacts Research Centre. So they're interested in, of course, climate research, but also in how to, maybe through art projects, maybe through more scientific projects, but how to engage the public in an understanding of the importance of climate issues. So the collaboration has been basically that's why I'm still alive here. I've made 5 trips up there, and I've been camping by myself in a tent through 5 different periods across 12 months. So the temperatures were ranging from like 15 degrees down to like minus 27, I think, centigrade. And
centigrade, okay.
Yeah, Celsius, yeah. So and in December there was like very little. There was no direct sunlight. It was just coming around the curvature of the Earth. And then in the summer it was like the midnight sun. It just didn't go down. So it's been quite fun. And then I've been up there making different ambisonic sound recordings. This is my tent from February actually, and so I've been making different sound recordings in different weather conditions, and also when the water is running, there's been a mountain stream. I've been at the same location every time to see how it changes over the seasons, and I've also been doing some underwater hydrophone recordings as well.
Wow, nice.
So if we just look at some, I thought this would be some nice pictures to put up.
Are there wolves or bears up there or anything? Or?
Apparently there are possibly some bears. I found out on one of the later trips, but I didn't see any, luckily. Yeah. So I was out there for like between 3 to 5 nights on each trip by myself, and then I had the help of the research station to get me out there and collect me and to keep in contact.
So they drove you or something? Or?
No, we had to hike.
Yeah.
So having had no experience, I had to learn how to snowshoe, and then I snowshoed 8 kilometers.
So how long did it take you to get there to that location?
It took between 1.5 and 4 hours, depending on the weather.
Not so bad.
Well, I think it's bad. No, it's like it's a lot of. It was basically a bit difficult for the first 2/3 on the way up, and then the last third was quite steep. And when that snow was quite heavy, and you have I was carrying the equipment bag, and that was like 17-18 kilograms, and that was, for me, that was a bit heavy. But the people who are helping me, they're used to being out in this terrain, and they could carry like 30 kilogram packs and stuff. But we did it with a pull cut with a sledge, and they would be on skis when we're going out. But I can't ski, so we didn't actually get to me learning. We just I had to do the snowshoe thing, which was fun, but except for a few times. but when I was finding it very hard to keep going back to civilization afterwards.
How long, when you would go up there, you were there for how many days before you went to the camp?
None. Some later trips I changed a bit, but the December one, I had to stay a night in a tourist station because the train was delayed and it was too dangerous to go up when I got there. It was too late, too late in the evening.
And what's the elevation?
I think there it was about 600 meters.
600 meters.
Yeah. And then I think at one point I went up to 800 meters on a Friday evening hike. But mostly I tended to stay around the area because we wanted to document that place, and there was the scientist collaborator chose that spot so I'd have a lot of variety in sounds I could record. So this was kind of daily life when I was there, like heating up water, cooking these freeze-dried food, which I really liked to start with, and then I couldn't wait to get a sandwich afterwards. This is while it was called a mountain stream, but I would say that's more of a torrent of a massive amount of water flowing. So this is where I was recording the underwater sounds. And this is the helicopter that had to come and check on me in December. So that was a bit weird. I had I basically said, I think in the December trip it got a bit. There weren't many sounds to record. I'd recorded everything, and I just asked. They were going to come and collect me in the 6 o'clock that evening, and and at 9 o'clock in the morning I was like, if I'm totally honest, I'm not really enjoying this now. I'm like, I've done the sound recording. It's very cold. Every morning my clothes are literally like frozen, and I'm having to put them on, and it was the food. The food did it for me. I was just like, I really just want like a sandwich or something. It's like I would have. That was my dream was just for some fresh bread actually. So I just said in the morning, I was like, I'm totally fine. I didn't want to worry them at all, and I said, is there any possibility I could come back a bit earlier? But they were being very conscientious and careful. They basically sent a helicopter to check on me. So I had like no human contact for 3 days. It had been mostly dark apart from these short periods like this where you could see the sun coming round, this kind of pink, bluey sky for a little bit before it went totally dark again. And then I just hear this helicopter coming in, and within like a minute it's landed next to me, and this person jumps out and comes over and just asks me, are you all right? It was like a one-to-one performance to me. And are you all right? And I said, well, yeah, I'm okay. And basically they could take me back right now in the helicopter, but not with my stuff. And then I was like, I'll stay here because they're going to come and get me, and it's like, I have to pack everything away. So they went, and then later on I got picked up. But the scientist that I was collaborating with, basically later, he told the helicopter people later, he was like, I'm not surprised, he's quite attached to his expensive sound equipment, so I'm not surprised he didn't leave without it. Yeah.
Well, I guess it's also the concern is that they have to protect you against yourself in some cases because you might not know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the main danger. When I was talking to them on one of the trips up, it's like the main danger there is yourself, actually, and just taking risks. So they're very good at like pointing out what is, don't really go down to the water because when it's with the snow, because you don't know, it's all definitely frozen underneath. And actually in December when it was like minus 25 one evening, and I was out there and it's so silent, and in the summer the sound of the water is really loud, so it's like this, it's almost like the sea when you go to sleep, and you can hear it in many of the sound recordings that I'll put into the installation from this. But in the winter it was totally quiet except for this very it's like glassy sound. I was like, what's that? And I was recording, and it's basically, even in those temperatures, a bit of water flowing through the ice. Yeah. So if you go down on the snow and you don't realise, you can go into it and be carried under. So you have to be quite careful. So I did a lot of research and listening to what they were saying.
When I was a teenager, I went under the ice a couple of times, and once was on a snowmobile, and it was very hard to get up.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could have died in that case. As in Wisconsin gets colder.
Yeah, it's you have to take it sensibly. So and as I wasn't really used to this, I took it quite carefully. Yeah, but anyway, I made it back. So and you did too. But this is a selfie in the snow.
Is this you?
This is me, yeah. So this is me in my my kind of super warm clothing.
That's a cool picture, dude.
Yeah, I know, it's quite, I kind of like it. So this is when I was recording. I basically had one day, I was on the last trip in February, I was going up there and they were saying, is there anything you want to record that you haven't recorded yet? And I was saying, well, part of this project is to record what's here, right? It's not really about that. But of course you start to go, oh, I'd quite like to have this. And I was saying, I hadn't really got any really kind of cool wind, and then, it's like, of course, be careful what you wish for. So I was like, hopefully I really like that to happen. And then one day starts getting windy, gets quite windy, gets really windy, and then I'm just like, of course, this is the time. So I go outside, and I mean, it's really it's almost like blowing the microphone and me over. It's like getting quite strong, and there's snow kind of whipping up. And I was just, I was in the zone. I was like, this is really cold, but this sounds so cool. I'm loving this. So I recorded loads of it. Went back to the tent, and what I'd forgotten was that I'd only half built a snow wall to protect the tent from the snow. So I go back and half the tent is just like a mountain of snow. So then I'm like I managed to get into the tent, put the equipment in, and then I spend like another hour at midnight like shoveling snow out of the tent. So so that's like, it's a bit different to recording in other places. So this is how it's going to be. So I was developing it in the Black Room here before summer. So it's going to be done as an 8-speaker setup with the tent that I stayed in, and the audience will go in, or visitor will go in one at a time. Yeah, they will go into the tent, they will lie down, and have this immersive experience of these sounds I've recorded. And in this work, we're talking about interaction again. They will have an EEG headband, which will monitor their brain frequencies.
EEG.
EEG. Yeah. I've forgotten the exact full name. But, it's like
here.
It's here. It's around. Yeah. So this means that you can basically map that data in real time. So if they're, for example, very relaxed, then you can start to have certain weather coming on top of that. Or if they're very unfocused or focused, then you can start to use that. So this is a way for me to explore climate change. The idea of this project is to explore climate change through these kind of immersive practices, this one-to-one methodology that I'm exploring, how you can reach people individually, and you can have this idea that people have shared experiences you can build on. So
could I ask you a question about that?
Yeah, sure.
So when you talk about kind of tracking climate change, then you need to be able to show some sort of change. Or
climate change, yeah.
So what were you showing in the audio?
Oh, you mean in this installation?
Yeah. Or you mean in general?
Yeah. In this project, it's basically the main core of it is the tent, the actual installation part.
Yeah.
So this is kind of, there's no like there'll be a little bit of information about what it is, but there's no kind of, they'll know that the sounds come from this one place, and they're actual like recorded by me in this place that's inside the Arctic Circle, and they're going to change the weather effectively of this space that they're feeling as if they're inside by their through their thought process, through their brain activity. So it's basically creating a link between them and this recreated environment.
So according to how the data comes through the sensors, then that will change the sound in some ways.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So it's kind of trying to create a link between the individual and these elements, is this environment.
Because my first thought was, so you're comparing what you recorded then with the sound 50 years ago.
No, because it's because I wanted to record it in a specific format.
4-channel or 8-channel? It's
going to be 8 channels from ambisonic content. Yeah. So then, and there's also some lighting effects and a wind machine. So it's so I'm interested when I work with immersive technology. I have this idea that I've seen it happen. Actually, it's more effective sometimes to work with certain sensory stimuli and then to not have others. So when I work with darkness, that's because I think when you have a lot of immersive sound, it can be more powerful it's like the thing about, radio has the best pictures. It's that same idea. Like if you try and fill in everything, you come across the technological limits quite quickly. But if you have something that's
discrepancy.
It's discrepancy, exactly. And if you try to, it's kind of interesting in itself, but it's also something that you can go into more with your own imagination in a way. So that's how I think about this. So this will be a dark room with a light inside the tent, and they'll be lying in. And we can see a little video of what it looks like.
Do you have a picture of the sound machine of the wind machine?
Not on here, but I can show you later. Yeah, if you. Or maybe next time I bring it, you can check it out.
Curious.
Just on the speakers here, but so the wind machine is active, and this is one of the recordings I made in February, and this is the lighting effect as well.
And the wind machine is by the windows?
Yeah, it's kind of in the corner in the room, so it's sort of that way.
So it's more.
Yeah. Then this is outside.
So this is kind of. Explore how you can trigger some instinctive stress or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is kind of really about like people kind of going inside this tent and make a connection between. I mean, actually, specifically looking at the south of Sweden and the north of Sweden, because there's a huge difference in landscape, and it's very different here in Malmö compared to up there. So part of it is like looking at that contrast. So, you know, rather than trying to make it work up there and get everyone up, it's more like, let's give a taste of this, and let's also think about how I was there and what I experienced and what I recorded. So part of it is that, and then it's also looking at how to think about the climate without text, without information, because we all learn differently. So it's like, if I have these recordings that are interesting and evolving enough in themselves, then people will have this experience where they're feeling, hopefully, closer to the environment. And if they know that they are affecting it, and they're not getting the same experience every time, depending on who's going in, maybe they think afterwards that they have this, they have a different approach to their level of influence, I guess, on these bigger kind of issues. So this is like this is the first art and science collaboration I've done, and this was really looking at these methods that I'm working with and seeing, could they work not in just a kind of art context with my kind of concepts, but could they work in a bigger sense, in something that's more like something where, like this, they have a problem where they can't reach a lot of people effectively to talk to them about, you know, it's like you can shout at someone that this climate change is real, it's really affecting, but not everyone will listen, and not everyone will want to respond. Some people actually like negatively respond to being told things. So this is an idea that if you work with immersive technology and you try to create these connections with people individually, maybe this is a useful thing for working with concepts such as climate change. It's a different approach to that, but could this be a useful way for people to feel more connected to nature and more responsible for it? Yeah. So it's really a hypothesis. It's really like a test of this.
You said something, and I just want to understand it correctly. You said how, so that the person who is experiencing the work would be aware of how they are participating in climate change. What did you mean by that?
No, I think they'll be aware that they're able to influence the work.
In which way are they?
Through wearing a headband, and they'll know that can change the weather in the installation.
And how is that? How is that done? Just, I'm not sure I understand that.
Oh, okay. So they wear this headband. So when they lie down, they'll have a headband put on them, and they'll know beforehand that it's again the same thing with like a blackout. It's like, I don't want to put technology on people without explaining what it is and what it's for. Going back to this idea of like people are good enough to try something, so I want to also not make people like, oh my god, what is this? So it's a way of also doing that, but they will know that this is something that they can influence. So I think it's also something they can play with. Like if they want to try and calm down, they can change the weather. So it's trying to it's about creating a link between their kind of thinking in a very like broad sense, because you know it's registering kind of levels of anxiety or focus in a way, and levels of relaxation.
What exactly is it measuring? Is it measuring blood flow? Is it measuring perspiration? Is it measuring brainwaves?
It's brainwave frequency. Yeah.
Brainwave frequency.
Yeah.
Frequency. Okay.
Yeah. So it's like the electromagnetic.
And
frequency.
is there a correspondence between, let's say, anxiety or anger with coldness and wind, or you know?
Yeah.
Is it in that sort of register of
translation?
So
so this is like, because it's not been finished developed yet. So this is something I'm going to be testing. Is like. Because in a way you've got like a kind of feedback loop, because you have like the sound being triggered off one state, but then maybe the sound will go into another state. So where does the influence come in strongly, or like how does it? And probably what will happen is that when people come in, it's more like their own response to that situation, and then later it's more like a bit like how people come out of my works with a certain like calmness or something. It's probably likely that they'll start to go into more, people will share the same sort of brain frequency range at the end. But I don't know. This is also like, this is part of the next bit of testing. But but the idea is that it will respond to that.
That's a difficult research question because there's so many different subjective responses depending on culture, depending on the type of person they are. That's so many variables there. That would be difficult.
Exactly, and I mean for this it's like it's
but interesting.
Yeah, it's more about like having I mean probably how it will be done in the end is like you just have different thresholds and then certain sounds get triggered, and maybe it's a sound sequence. Like for example going into the water and under the water and out. So it's something that's I have a structure or different structures in mind, but it's something that I'm going to play with a bit in the next bit.
But how would that relate to real life then? Could this be something that could be applied to people who are hikers, who are going up mountains, and they could use the technology to have them relax, or what are the types of?
Well, the technology itself, I mean, the EEG technology, it's the headband I've got is actually used by a meditation app company. They've made it a meditation app. Company, yeah. So they use it actually, so you can kind of like it's like a progress thing. You can see how like much how good your meditation is in a way, or like so it's used more like that. So it's kind of so that they use sort of more like meditation purposes and then more like scientific research. So this is kind of where the main thing and some kind of interaction stuff that you can get these devices made for a bit of research as well. So but this is just as a way of like taking data and starting to have the individual person responding in a way that's relevant to what I want to do with the project, which is to have people have an experience where they start to think about what they can affect and be a bit closer to nature.
And so you think a real world application would be not in nature itself, but for people who want to have a certain type of experience, artificial experience.
You mean with this specific? I think it's quite open actually. I think it could go to different. I mean, one thing is it could be done in Obisco because there's a lot of tourists going up there who don't go that far into it, and they don't necessarily think about the scientific aspects. They're just all about the tourism and the photos and the hiking challenges and stuff like that. So I think there's definitely a big potential there. And also it can be in science context, it can be in art context, it can be in like political context. So I think the work is again, it's not really
like a science museum, right?
Yeah. But
Tim, it's interesting. 10 years ago or something, I had a hypothesis because I was working with moods, and I was making the analogy that if everything is, the premise was that if everything is energy, which it is, then let's say that the heat of anger will affect basically the coldness of the world, and through there are these meditations where you have to experience cold even if you don't, and you have to experience heat even if you don't. And so I was kind of thinking that let's say that all these violences that is happening all over the world is creating a kind of heat which is enabling this kind of climate change, in terms of melting the ice and stuff. But of course it's a bit on what you are saying. I think
I think it's like thinking about your presence, I guess, as a human, and
emitting rays or energy or something that affects these different structures in both geology and biology. It's very
and I mean working with climate, it's also like this the thing is I was staying there, I mean it's also I had to go in that environment, and therefore I would have had an impact on that environment just by going there. I mean, I took the train up there, but that's still, I was part of electric usage on the train, and there were things where I got something and there's no recycling at a certain place, so there's also that as well. But the idea is to really connect people to nature in a specific way, again on this individual way. So just to round off, so leading from that project, I've been quite curious with this art and science collaboration. We're running a little bit over, so I'll just be a bit speedy. But I was part of an ESS residency, And as part of that, there were 7 artists who were selected to work in this residency, and it was arranged by ESS, the European Spallation Source, which is they're building basically a massive particle accelerator, like a super powerful microscope. Is my it's my description of it. I did have a lot of knowledge about it, but I'm not very good at repeating the knowledge very well. But we basically had it was an online thing last year, end of last year. So it was during the pandemic, and the idea was to pair artists with scientists or engineers working at ESS, and just to have conversations and see what could happen from the kind of cross-pollination of mixing these different people and different ideas and approaches. But we all got a bit further than they expected, so we all wanted to make something. And I was the one who happened to be based in, I'm based in Lund, which is the same place as the ESS, and I was also able to meet with the person I had, not just online. We actually met up outside ESS and walked around outside. And I had this idea to go inside and record the sound of the particle accelerator, which basically means, similar to the technique I used in Blackout, I was wanting to record the impulse response measurements of the different spaces, so that I could use it later for people to have sound that could appear as if it was coming from those specific spaces, because every acoustic space has a very unique sound, and I was like, what is kind of cooler than a particle accelerator or, in this picture, the target, which is where the proton beam will be smashed.
Sure. So that space there is the target in which a neutron or proton will be shot from about the distance of about 300 meters.
600, I think it is.
So it's like about 300 3 football fields away.
Yeah.
And they shoot it down a line, a pipe, a tubing, and it'll smash against this target here, which is that thing.
So it's not all installed, but it's basically like a big thing that spins around with little fins on it, and then it's like the beam hits it and smashes off, and it's redirected down these little, I think it's these channels here. They're not all opened yet, but they're going to be down. Yeah. And then
we have about 10 different lines to shoot into.
Yeah. And then that beam is used to image certain things. Yeah. We should have someone from ESS explaining this bit. But basically, it's a massive concrete space. But this space here is it's going to be closed off because it's going to be so radioactive that when it's functional, which I think it's maybe around now, it's no one is going to be allowed to go in there. 2025. But I think maybe they're testing it sooner. I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, they'll be testing it up till then.
Yeah. So basically, the possibility to record the sound of this space was a very unique thing, because it's now going to be just robots in there. So, but now you can actually, the work I've made, you can hear your voice in there, or any music you want to, or a cat sound, whatever, and it'll sound like it's coming from in that space, because it's the actual acoustics of that space. So this is me up here with the microphone recording. I think I look quite bad in a hard hat, but I thought, for the interest of showing you stuff, I should do it. This is me at the bottom. With
we'll leave that with the rest of us.
Yeah. This is setting up the speaker at the bottom. And this is I hate this picture of me, but if we look at, this is actually the end of the accelerator. So this is they haven't connected the beam yet, but right at the back here you can see where the proton beam is going to go through about 15 meters of concrete, and that it ends up in that space. So it just was that big cylinder. So actually the speaker here, when I was doing it, it's good when you do this measurement to have a music signal as well, so you can compare the actual reverb measurement later by putting the same music track through it as the one you actually recorded with the same setup. And I played Paranoid with Black Sabbath, and playing it here, basically, if you know at speaker design, you have this like reflex port that improves the bass response, like a big tube in a way. I'm not so good at explaining that either, but basically this 15 meter long tunnel here and this access one here that they're using at the moment made the bass really good. So it sounds awesome in there, and I think the people from ESS also enjoyed it. So I had these measurements. These measurements I have, and I may do something separate with them later. But I made this work called Sounding ESS. It's a computer installation and you basically have the ability to switch out the position, the different ones I measured. So for example, this one would be the accelerator tunnel, and you're 2 meters down that tunnel from the end. And then you have the ability to play a drum loop, or to open a microphone which you can speak into, sing into. You tried it. And then you hear your voice coming back, or the drum loop coming back from the end of the accelerator in this example, and it's as if you're actually in there listening to it, because it's recorded with ambisonics and rendered binaurally on headphones, so it sounds like you're there and you're listening to your voice come back from this space. And this was the idea of this, really it was like to use this idea of sounding as a way of putting sound into something, but also kind of allowing people to get a sense of the scale of it or the depth of it, because the project really was about how do you, particularly with me, my limited scientific understanding, how do you understand this huge facility with so many complex things that can be done there, and things that you can describe the benefit of to society, but also, you know, that's one thing, but how do you really get a sense of the scale of this? You know, how do you understand that there's a 600 meter long kind of tunnel with this beam going down? How do you understand there's this massive cylinder? So this was a way of using acoustics for people to relate to this space, and actually by putting their own voice into it, it's like now they're feeling, hopefully, part of it.
That's a question.
Yeah.
I'm really not a librarian or a school marm or anything like that, but those definitions, where'd you get them from?
Actually, don't remember now. I'd have to look
Yeah,
where.
they're wrong.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. It was. I tweaked them a little bit for artistic purposes, but.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's not a. Don't take this as a dictionary definition. But
okay.
I think they did come from dictionary definitions. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I'm a bit naughty like that. No, it was really like this idea of appreciating, using sound to appreciate the scale of something.
Okay.
Yeah. So I did. I don't know if I tweaked them or if I found ones that I just. Yeah. I wouldn't. It's not what I'd do in an essay, but I think this is something that I put into the work just to frame it.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's.
Oh, you didn't have a sample of the ESS sound?
No, because I didn't want to complicate things by playing something today. Yeah, but you can check it out on the 9th of December at the Dissemination Conference. It's going to be here.
Okay.
It'll be a demo of it. Yeah. No, so I, despite working with sound, I thought I would not do that
that's
today.
called creating desire.
Exactly.
There you go.
Coming
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
Yeah. But just to give you a few examples of things I've been doing and where I'm heading with projects.
Yeah, super.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions, any comments? No? Okay, well, thank you, Tim.
All right. Thank you.